So, Oleg, welcome to CTO Confessions. It's great to have you on board, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And who do you work for?
My name is Oleg Korenfeld. I'm a Chief Technology Officer at CMI Media Group. We are a healthcare marketing agency. And what that means is we work with some of the world's biggest healthcare and pharma marketers to find the audiences for their products and advertise those products in different channels across the internet and television and magazines and billboards and everything else. My job as a Chief Technology Officer of a media agency is to find the best possible tech stack, either build or buy, to help manage all the data that is required to make the most accurate plans for the types of audiences we want to target, and either buy that technology off the shelf and integrate into the process, or build it when a technology is not available, because we are fairly unique in the way we plan and buy media, and often there's just no off-the-shelf solutions that are available, or if they are, we end up customizing so much around it where it makes no sense to buy it anymore. It makes sense to build it from scratch.
Yeah, and I can imagine the space that you're in, because the AI is something I'm going to be talking about very shortly. That kind of technology, it's kind of a bit of an innovation storm at the moment. There's lots of stuff going. It's the goalposts are always moving. So I suppose in that space, you're finding stuff isn't off the shelf at all.
That's true. Yes, AI, and we can talk more about what that means to us and just in general, is something that we've been applying to our business for actually probably over 15 years now in different ways of analyzing our data, just used to call it machine learning. But now, especially in the last few years, with explosion of just general kind of AI being the zeitgeist of kind of our cultures, where people for the first time who are not technologists were able to feel it and understand what it does, became a much more important element of reevaluating every single process that we have in our business and seeing where we can improve it by automation. So I kind of try to put it in these three buckets. We apply AI to automate a process that historically maybe been manual, maybe predictive AI using, and that's the one that we've been using for many, many years, where because we sit on so much data, just marketing data, we can process it for much more accurate predictions of how well campaigns will do in different channels. And then obviously generative AI, that's kind of the reason why we're talking about this in the first place, applications of taking processes and saying, okay, if I build a prompt screen to provide a prompt screen to people in our company, I want to be very careful. I want to be confident that the results they will get are accurate and secure, because again, in healthcare, the one important element and why we are probably more reserved and more conservative, specifically with generative AI in some cases, is because of how sensitive the data that we work with is. So trusting the data set and making the data set available that could be used for generative AI is the first order of business before we can put that power in the hands of hundreds of people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to take a step back to the company that you're working for, CMI, because you're in an industry that you specialize in a particular industry, don't you?
Yeah. So I've been in marketing for about 26 years now, and I always like to say I'm not kind of classically trained CTO. I did not come up through code development. Probably the last time I wrote a line of code was probably JavaScript about 20 years ago.
Wow.
But where my experience comes from, and the reason why I'm in the role that I'm at, is because I spent 26 years working with and for different specifically designed technologies for marketing purposes. What happened in the late 90s, and I joined this industry in 1998 for a company called DoubleClick, which was one of the original digital marketing technologies out there. And I can talk about how I fell into that position, because that was not the grand plan for the time. But just to say that understanding how these technologies work, what drives them, how they're need to be interconnected to drive this planning and buying process, very complex marketing planning and buying process with media. My experience provides that perspective, and being able to work with, at this point, with so many different technologies, and work for very different technologies allows me to build the proper stack and find opportunities for innovation, and kind of saying, it would be amazing if this part of the process has historically been manual. We can build actually a solution around that and plug it into the process. So that's I kind of think of myself more a product person who can bring ideas, and by understanding how the stack is built ground up and kind of all the stages of evolution of this technology, because I've been in pretty much since the beginning, gives me that perspective.
Brilliant. And that is interesting that you don't come from what I would call a traditional technology background. And what are the challenges you find around that, being in this space and not being... It sounds like you know your stuff, but it's the kind of really low level stuff. Is that something that you're not involved in?
Yeah. So I think this applies to any kind of management, right? You surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, or more experienced with certain things. I understand this technology really well. I understand how it thinks and what it's supposed to do. So I can hire a true software development kind of leader who work with me and take kind of my vision and bring it to life. So that's exactly how my group is organized. I have a head of development who came up through engineering, and the role is to manage the software development team, QA, onshore, offshore, kind of all the pieces that are required to bring a product to life. And I also have a product strategy group that is kind of working kind of what's next, the big ideas. What can we do to make our products better, or maybe invent new products that don't exist today?
Excellent. And I guess we've got a lot of techies listening to this podcast. Hopefully a lot of techies listen to this podcast, and they're probably thinking, oh, I don't need to know all the tech. Does it have advantages not knowing the deep tech?
Yes. Just like anything else, sometimes maybe ignorance provides an opportunity to be more creative sometimes, because you don't immediately put yourself in a box. And I find myself playing that role with our development team. And I find myself actually on the receiving end of that when I'm talking to our business stakeholders, and when they understand less than I do even about like what it actually takes to bring an idea to life, they actually can be so much more creative, and they can make me think actually in very different ways as well. So I think it's very beneficial.
Yeah. And in your career development, your journey to where you've got to now, I imagine that kind of created some blocks or some... how did you open those doors?
Yeah.
I'm more curious is how you open doors.
Yeah. So like I said, this was not a grand plan. I joined this industry. I joined the company called DoubleClick, as I mentioned, in 1998 while I was still in college. I was, I think, my sophomore year of college. I wanted a job just so I can afford to move out of my parents' house and take my girlfriend out to dinner or something. And a company called DoubleClick was hiring people without any experience, because nobody had experience in digital marketing in 1998. So they were hiring very young people basically for peanuts or shells of peanuts. And I'm like, I'll take the job. My whole interview for that job had nothing to do with digital advertising, had nothing to do with technology. It had to do with 80s and 90s rock bands. Like that's what we're talking about. They were just looking for people probably who were kind of in the same vein as them, who kind of share the same interests in life, and see like, these people can learn. So I got a job, and I remember actually one technical question. I was lying. Actually, there was one technical question. Now you have to remember, it was 1998. The question was, do I think Internet Explorer or Netscape is a better browser?
Right.
And I said Netscape. And the reason why I said Netscape was because at the time I already had a couple of friends who were becoming developers, building websites. And I remember them keep talking, it's easier to build websites and render, and they would render better in Netscape environments. So I just blurred out Netscape, and turned out to be the right answer. So,
oh wow, yeah.
So that's kind of how I ended up working for that company. And for the first 2 years, actually, I didn't even realize that I was building a career. I was just a job while I'm in college. And then I started to learn more about it because my first job was basically being phone support for the first product that company built.
Right.
Original ad server. It does exactly what it says. It serves ads to websites. That's what it did. And that server would be sold to different publishing companies like New York Times and Wall Street Journal, sites in 1998. Again, keep going back, like who were companies, big publishing companies that were the first ones to develop online presence. And they realized they could start selling advertising in that online presence. So they needed a way to deliver the advertisement onto the page and track it and track performance, so they can go back to the advertiser and say, here's how well your ad did. So that was the product that I was supporting. And after a few years, so I switched. So because I was going full-time to college, once I got this job, I actually switched. I started going to college at night. I would work full-time and I would go to college at night. And because of that, it took me almost 8 years to graduate. Because I would take one or two classes a semester at most. That's all I could take because I would work full-time. And again, I was in my early 20s, so I have to put that in perspective as well. So after work, it would be bars. After work, it would be, early digital, before the bubble. And after that, I had to drag myself to class, listen to the professor, somehow pass the test. And after a few years, I realized like there's something to this marketing thing. It's interesting, just naturally fits kind of the way I think about the world and just creative part of it. And I started taking marketing classes in college because I didn't know because at the time I still thought maybe I'm going to be a developer. Like I said, a lot of my friends were developers. So I started taking software development courses. And the first one was COBOL. And I hated it. I dropped it after a month. And I told myself, I don't think I can become a software developer. I hate COBOL and I hate the logic and everything I need to understand to learn COBOL. And thankfully, this marketing kind of opportunity, again, I wasn't realizing at the time, came up and I started taking marketing classes. And at the time, most of the marketing in the late 90s was still very much TV driven. So the only people that we tend to talk to, like professionals, experts, would be like creative marketing people. Like think of like Don Draper from Mad Men. That's the type of people who would come in, do lectures saying, hey, this is like a famous advertisement that I came up with. And that was marketing. What I was doing at work had nothing to do with that. Because what I was doing at work was managing a technology that delivered advertising into a digital website. Very different world. And that connection of creative idea, executing a message that would resonate with someone, but in a very different environment, kind of took hold. And after a few years, I realized, actually, this is now not just a job while I'm in college. This is becoming a career. So I ended up graduating with minor in marketing and major in psychology. And the reason why psychology, again, I was almost 8 years it took me to graduate. I just need enough courses in something to get a major. And because I also love psychology, I had plenty of classes in psychology that to give me that major. So, like I said, my background and the way I ended up in this profession is just a lot of coincidences, just fell one on top of another.
That's a beautiful story, actually. It's got you where you are now. I'm curious, is the psychology you majored in, has that helped you at all? Has it given you an angle?
I think it does from the standpoint of dealing with people. I think psychology, and not just applicable to specifically working for advertising technologies and leading different elements of that, but in any kind of environment, understanding what drives different people that come from different worlds. Again, in our space in marketing, and I do say that I'm in marketing, I'm not in technology. I use technology to make marketing better.
Yes.
And because people come from different walks of life, especially people of my generation, a lot of people that you would ask did not major or minor in marketing. Now I think it's very different because I look at like even the last 10, 15 years, which has been amazing to watch new people that are graduating studying marketing. So it's not just about the Madman era. It's not about just John Drapers of the world. Now they're learning about social media and technology that drives it and how to measure and analytics and all these other very important pieces that are required to do marketing properly in digital ecosystems. So this generation of people, I think, is way more educated out of the gate than we were, because we were kind of learning, inventing things and learning things as we were going along, because it was a brand new way to communicate with people in this brand new channel. So my psychology, I think, background and just general interest, and I was interested in it in the same way as philosophy, just from the standpoint of kind of understanding human nature, because that's applicable anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're all people. Businesses are a bag of people. We're all hopefully trying to get all the same thing, achieved, the same goals. So coming back to CMI, I'm really curious around what marketing is like and the technology that you're applying. And in fact, you made a really interesting point here. I think all businesses are technology companies now, because they use technology. They're interwoven into this. So technology isn't the thing that we do. It's how we use it and how we apply it into the industry we're at. So in CMI's kind of like focus area, which is kind of like the medical field, what are the intricacies that you have to kind of use in that field that are different to other marketing? Are there differences?
Yes. And I think it all starts with the types of audiences we need to target. By target, I mean talk to. And in our world, there's two types of audiences. In the most simplest ways I would put it, there's doctors and then there's patients, healthcare providers and consumers of healthcare. And being able to communicate to both requires very different strategies and very different data sets to understand how to talk to them. And in different parts of the world, it's done very differently. In US, you can target consumers. In UK, you cannot. Different laws that are in place, and understanding how you can communicate to a doctor versus a patient, and the data that drives the understanding that there needs to be that difference is what drives technology. In the end of the day, the technology that we're building is there to support the process and support the data set that gives us the understanding of consumer we need to target. Clients pay us to invest their media dollars as effectively and efficiently as possible. Yes. So in a very restricted vertical like healthcare, with a lot of laws, with a lot of kind of hoops you need to jump through before the ad ends up being delivered. That's why you kind of see, like in the United States, when there is an ad that is running on television or online that you see that is targeting a patient, there's a lot of legal language scrolling across. Like, it's there for a reason. And being able to introduce all that into the calculation is driven by technology. So first and foremost, I need to understand our business inside and out. I need to understand why we select the certain doctors that we want to talk to, because a pharmaceutical company may come to us and say, here's a list of physicians we need to talk to about this new oncology drug. Life-saving, serious stuff. We need to identify the physicians. We need to understand where is the best time to talk to them, because physicians also are people, and they consume content, medical and not medical content, very differently. Historically, you may say, well, you can just buy like New England, Journal of Medicine. Yeah, that's one of the channels, but physician also comes home and watches TV. Right? Yes. And there is a way to communicate that person in that environment. So that's one way to kind of design messaging around how do you talk to a doctor about a drug before or after a sales rep walks into their office to talk to them about that drug, right? So because we're also always in that situation, work in partnership with the pharmaceutical company who has a sales team that goes out there and talks to doctors, right, about their products. On a consumer side, on the patient side, it's a very different story. You cannot target patients. You cannot even assume that this person has a condition. So there's a lot of kind of pre-built assumptions and lookalike models that are built on purpose. So we can kind of identify people who potentially may be interested in this subject matter. And that means, again, very different way to organize a data set to identify that interest, again, and connect it to a specific healthcare condition, and then be able to communicate that in a responsible way, digitally, specifically digitally, and then measure success of it. So again, all kind of going back to the technology that needs to be in place at every stage of that process. So there's kind of 4 general stages of marketing, and that applies to healthcare as well. There's insight stage where you design based on a lot of insights how and you're going to communicate with the intended audience. Then there's a planning stage where you plan your strategy, where you say, okay, again, simplistically, part of it will go into social media, part of it will go into this set of websites, part of it will go to television, part of it will go to billboards, part of it will go to, let's say, if it's physicians, let's say healthcare, physician conferences, right? If there's, let's say, in New York City, there's a conference for oncologists, and we know it's going to be on April 3rd, and and it's going to be in this hotel. That information gives us a lot of data that we can use to target very specific set of interested people, right? Yeah. So that's the planning stage. And then the activation stage, when you actually activate the media, and then measurement, you track when you start tracking how well that media did. So these 4 stages, at every stage requires certain pieces of technology to pull that analysis, that data through, and see if your plan matches your final result, and adjust it along the way, because it never exactly works to how you planned it, no matter how well you plan it. People are people, so kind of keep optimizing as much as you can along the way to deliver whatever the initial results you set forth for yourself, because clients judge us on how well we invest their media dollars, and there's certain metrics that they use to calculate that.
And what kind of timescales? So once you've come up with a plan and you're implementing the strategy, I can imagine this stuff doesn't work overnight. Okay, this is where I get a little bit confused about marketing, because it's not, you don't know when it's working, or maybe you never know when it's working.
I hate using cliches. I hate it, but I'm sorry, use a cliche. 50% of the money I spend on marketing doesn't work. Unfortunately, I don't know which 50%.
Yeah.
It was true when people were buying print and television. I think it's less true today because digital is so much better at tracking. Yes. And it kind of depends. Yes, the feedback loop is the kind of the funnel, the measurement funnel is so much more accurate these days because of digital the technology that allows us to track engagement and all those elements. But timing is always different. It kind of depends on what the goals are, right? Some campaign is like, in most simple terms, I need to sell Band-Aids. So I'm running a campaign to sell Band-Aids at 3 pharmacies, or let's say 100 pharmacies in the state of New York. I'm in New York, so I'm using New York as reference. Yeah. So that is actually fairly easy to calculate, because as a seller of Band-Aids, I know which stores are selling my product. So when I activate my campaign, I know how well I was saying, how many Band-Aids I sold before the campaign went live. And now with introduction of this campaign, I know how many Band-Aids I'm selling now. So that delta, that lift, again, in very simple terms, is how I measure how well the marketing is working, how quickly my messaging is penetrating the people who live in the area that goes to those stores.
Fascinating.
But then there's other ways where it's not that straightforward. And sometimes it takes months to really understand the impact of marketing, in addition to other efforts that you probably had to see a lift in sales. So let's say if we take a pharmaceutical brand, they may track script lift. How many more scripts are being written for the drug by doctors that live in a certain area that are specialists in a certain field of medicine, and you would expect to write a prescription for that drug.
Right. Yeah.
That usually takes, again, because the sample is so much smaller, right? So being able to track accurately the lift, it may take a little bit more time.
So I imagine this is like a very distributed Scrum team. Okay, there's people at different levels and at different points in this project that you're trying to achieve a result out of. how does that come together? Is there a technology or a dashboard that everybody looks at where people are able to see what they need to see at their level and their part in the system?
Actually, that's a great question. And you're actually kind of setting me up for kind of the purpose of my job. Because historically speaking, like I said, a lot of tools has been developed. I developed to address certain elements of those 4 core stages of marketing. And the holy grail always been, can we connect as many of these tools, because they're built for very specific purposes, right? How cleanly can we connect some of these tools to one another to have that view at every stage of the process? Yes, the output could be a dashboard, it could be a report, it could be many different ways you can measure or look at the performance, but connecting these tools. And again, the way technologies are usually built, they're built in silos. And another interesting thing, because I spent many years working, and I can only talk up to, for the most part, about ad tech and martech, marketing technologies and advertising technologies. They're often built just by addressing a very specific need, very specific issue, without really understanding how they fit in the overall process. So I spent first 16 years of my life actually working for these kind of technologies, very much kind of with blinders on. This tool is built to perform this task. When I joined the other side of the industry, the actual investment side, the media side, where that buys, and understand they need to see a much broader view of the industry because they have to go through these stages. They need to see how at the insight stage, technology that was used affects what happens in the activation stage and then measurement stage. So this is where you start to evaluate technology, going like, this technology integrates well with this one. This technology actually built not to integrate with anybody. And it's difficult to work with them because they don't integrate well. And this is where the ideas come. Well, if there are technologies out there that don't integrate well, and these are the only technologies that are available to address this, I will go out there and build something that will address it. But I'm not going to build in a silo. I want to build it as part of a much larger ecosystem. So my job in my current in my company is to build this kind of end-to-end planning and buying solution. Again, it's a bit of a holy grail because historically agencies were never really technical or savvy enough to, and I speak broadly about media agencies, because again, their goal was not technology. The goal was to invest media, right? So very different. They come, for the most part, historically came from different places, but it's transforming. And the fact that my role exists inside media agency says how well it is being transformed, where we're understanding that at this point, you cannot do these 4 stages in silos. It has to be interconnected. There need to be some kind of a logical pull through. Usually it's the data, but there needs to be a technology that can kind of pass the puck, pass the buck from one stage to the other without losing sight of it. Because fragmentation means losing money. It also goes back to us investing clients' dollars to find their audiences. If we're not investing them efficiently enough, it ends up being spill. It's waste. Right. And a good example would be like when you buy a Super Bowl ad, like in the United States, the biggest sports event of the year. It's famous for really, really expensive commercials. Advertisers that buy that space don't target anybody very specifically. They know it's a spray and pray kind of thing. They're targeting 300 million people, hoping that a percentage of those people will be interested in that product. And whoever that ad is also being shown to, who are not going to react, is basically cost of doing business. In digital marketing, that cost of doing business is much more measurable because you know who engaged with your ad and who didn't, and how quickly you can adjust by removing from people from your target that have no chance of ever reacting to your ad.
Yes, right. And again, I'm speaking from total naivety here. Is there kind of like different tests, experiments you do? Because this all seems like a big experiment. There's a multi-dimensional experiment. So you'll have a number of different examples that you're trying to see which one gets the most traction.
Yes. So another beautiful thing about digital ecosystem, you can do A/B testing way. You can see results from A/B testing way faster. and you can make changes on the fly, where historically a brand manager, let's say for a car, would have some analysis about, what kind of message they want to have, what kind of audiences they're going to target. But in the end, it's kind of the final product, the actual commercials we see on TV. It's kind of comes out of the head of a creative people. And until they run it, they don't know how well it's going to perform. Again, going back to the importance of data, historical data set of how well campaigns perform allows us upfront to know, kind of to see how this movie will play out.
Yeah, right.
So we can gauge the expectations so much more accurately, meaning we don't have to spend more money on that spillover.
Yes. Yeah.
So from the standpoint of going to creative person saying like, I know you built two ads, the blue one and the green one, and I know you like the color blue more, but our data says the green one will probably perform better. So even though you as a creative person may like the blue, we're telling you the green one will get you more bang for your buck.
Wow. Yeah. And that's a beautiful feedback loop to their work. So this brings me on to an interesting topic, because you're introducing new technology, new ways of thinking, new ways of doing the whole thing, and integrating it up to kind of create a new way of doing the whole process end to end. Do you get resistance in this industry? Do you, I don't know if you can mention people in your current company at the moment. Obviously, we don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but I mean, is there resistance in the space? Because this is a changing environment.
The reason why I'm at my company is because there's belief all the way from the top to the bottom that technology and data drives our success. So not only I don't have resistance, I have support and investments every year, reinvestments every year in this, because we see that it works. But in my experiences, yes, absolutely. And especially I would say, and again, I hate to do this, but introducing something new into an environment that is comfortable with what they've been doing for many years, again, it's not just in our industry, in any industry. Think about it. If you spent your entire career planning and buying media for television, and now the consumption of content is shifting to digital, and you have to learn a completely different set of things to be able to plan and buy media in a completely different world, there'll be some natural resistance to that. You're going to hold on to what you know. And honestly, I expect the same thing to happen to me. I've been doing this for 26 years. I probably have, hopefully, some more years in me. But I'm also, I think, on a kind of not a spring chicken in this industry. So at some point, there will come a time where I may become that, and I'm honestly so conscious of it. I'm trying to learn new things all the time to kind of push that can down the road as far as possible. But it's possible that at some point there'll be something new that I will not be able to grasp anymore. There'll be people behind me who will, and I'll be that person who I was mad at 15 years ago when I was trying to bring digital into a buying environment, and they were saying, no, TV is king. We don't need to do anything else. That's what's important.
Yeah. So if I gave you a soapbox right now, Oleg, and you were able to talk to marketers out there that may be in that kind of resistance, group, what would you say to them?
How many more years do you have before you retire? Because if you think you have another 10 or 15 years left, you have no choice. Because people who are younger, who are hired now, who cost less than you do, are growing up in this environment. It's natural to them. It's not even new to them. It's natural to them. So what are you doing to take really deep and valuable experiences that you have, but apply it to the new way of understanding how to speak to a consumer?
Beautiful. Nicely put. Now, coming back to AI, we had a few conversations offline around AI. What are your thoughts on? Let's start off right from the ground. What do you think of AI and this kind of term that gets kicked around out there?
So the term is stupid. It does not really represent what it is. There's nothing artificial or nothing intelligent, I believe, in what's actually happening. It's machine learning. That part is very intelligent, but it's done by human intelligence, by HI, to design it, to do it that way. Artificial intelligence comes from science fiction. In the 1960s, Isaac Asimov, great writer, I read a lot of his books. That's where that's where it comes from, and that's where it should have stayed. I think things like machine learning, large models, like those are the terms that better describe, I think, what we're talking about here, right? And there's two things, again, from the standpoint of explaining it to people who feel like they have to know something about it but are afraid because it seems complex. There's general AI, which is very different from generative AI, and then there's narrow AI, right? So in general AI, that's when machines become self-aware. That's science fiction. That doesn't exist today. Everything we talk about, from smart thermostat that I might have in my house to ChatGPT, it's all narrow AI, right? It all follows specific set of rules. And understanding basic applications of what this technology can do is key. Bringing it into your world and not thinking of I'll use AI just because it's the term that we all decided to use, even though it's clear how I feel about the actual term. It's not a monolith. It's not one thing. AI is different types of technologies meant to address different types of tasks. So the way I've been educating myself and our company and our clients is trying to put in kind of three general categories. Technology that is used to automate a process that historically been manual. Technology that helps you crunch a ton of data to come up with accurate predictions. And then invention, I guess, of new information using generative AI. Because the reason why generative is so different is because you actually create new data sets. You're not repurposing old data sets. In generative AI, you actually create something new. And trusting the data, the foundational data that you use to do that, it becomes so much more important, right? So when ChatGPT first kind of became part of our everyday conversation, you may remember there was so many articles written about, it made this mistake, it made that mistake. We even came up with the term hallucination, AI hallucination, which all that means is just make mistakes. It sounds so much cooler. And the reason why that was happening is because ChatGPT was scraping the bottom of the internet for the data set without separating what is quality of data.
Yeah.
Right? And they realized very quickly they can't do that. Data has to be labeled, data has to be qualified, data has to be trusted so the result can be used. So being able to kind of break those applications to different pieces, I think helps our teams and our clients to kind of go like, okay, I don't have to be afraid of it. I can find a small place to start. Usually it's around automation because that's the easiest place, because everybody knows a task that's been pain in the butt for many, many years, that is very manual, prone to error, that you can just write the rules to automate that, using a bot to do that. I use this, I always ask this question. In advertising technology, in the last 25, 26 years, what has been the most consistent piece of technology that's been used by everybody? And people start saying, well, it's the ad servers, is this. Immediately mind goes to like, oh, it's Salesforce, it's like these kind of technologies. I'm like, no, actually it's Excel. Microsoft Excel is the most consistent piece of technology that's been used in advertising for the last 26 years, with all its flaws, because there was nothing better. And being able to cut and paste cells, forgetting to add a zero, forgetting to add a period here, that was all cost of doing business because there was nothing better. This is where now we can, and Excel was kind of been this connective tissue between, remember those technologies that I told you about that some connect well to one another, some don't. And the ones that don't, but you have to use, we've been using Excel as an industry to connect information between one tool and the next tool.
Wow.
Automating that process gets rid of that error. It's removing the opportunity for human error between different tasks. So that is something that is familiar to people. That is something that people can appreciate and understand. And instead of doing something flashy out of the gate, going like, look what cool stuff ChatGPT can do. let me not scare you by the data set and the work that needs to go in up front to make sure that you can trust the prompt to come back with the correct answer. Let's start with something simple. Let's take a manual process and automate it. And when you realize the value of it, you can kind of learn from that and move on to something a little bit more complex. I've been using an example of email. I'm old enough to remember when email became important part of communication in business. And people who embraced the use of email became way more efficient and effective in their work. So to me, applications of AI solutions is that. And I know in our industry, this phrase has been thrown around a lot, and it's not mine. I don't know. I'm going to probably butcher it, but I'm going to paraphrase it. Because people are afraid of, wait, my job will be automated and eliminated. Probably some parts of your job. But AI will not take your job. Somebody who can manage AI better than you do will take your job. And that's the big difference, right? Again, going back to people, blacksmiths who were building horseshoes for horses, a lot of them went away when cars became the standard method of transportation. So blacksmiths had to convert their experience into building cars.
This is fantastic, Oleg. And I know we talked about experimentation earlier on, and I imagine there's a lot of experimentation going on with AI and how it's working. Is there any stories that you'd like to share here as a confession that kind of give an indication as to some of the challenges you have in this space?
Sure. Again, the beautiful thing about it is we're trying, right? And we're going into something with the best intentions and sometimes maybe unrealistic expectations into what this thing can do. Because especially from technological perspective, when you talk to people who may not fully understand yet how technology works, what it takes, the assumption will be, well, it's magic. It can do anything. And it's not magic. It does require a lot of planning, setting goals to deliver something. So last year, we wanted to take a process and add generative AI element to it where we would evaluate a lot of data points around performance of campaigns, and where a planner, person responsible for building plans, would be able to, instead of pulling reports and organizing their plan, they would be able to just ask open questions about, hey, can you recommend what strategy will do great for this plan, and which sources of supply and data would perform well? What we've learned very quickly is generative AI was not great at crunching numbers. It's good at text, it's good at image, but it's not good at numbers, which is surprising because everything is built on numbers. And what we've learned is I can't just trust anybody to ask a question in any way to come back with the same answer. So we ended up kind of trying to tailor the prompts in a very certain way to come up with the answer. And that became kind of almost like, what are we doing? Like the whole purpose to make things easier, not harder. So just because we can write a chatbot with prompts to ask questions, if I cannot trust it to always come back with an accurate answer because I don't know how the planner will phrase their question, I cannot put this tool in the hands of hundreds of planners. So we actually had to roll back that idea at least and go like, okay, we have a bunch of different great data sets that we know, if properly analyzed, will come back with the right answer. But it's not ready for the generative AI chatbot kind of version of that just yet. So we've been able to build that. So now the output is more automated, where it's more kind of predictive AI that is analyzing performance of past campaigns and other data sets that goes into kind of recommending a plan. But it's much more, it doesn't have that open question methodology yet because we don't fully trust that. We don't know how the person will ask the question and we don't know the answer it's going to come back with.
Right. I'm reflecting here, about the kind of complexity of this. There's a lot of data flowing around, and then there's the quality of the data. It's almost like you're harvesting data. You're going out with your data combine harvester, and you're collecting the data and then making sure that the data is of a particular quality and can you use it? I mean, do people sit there actually sifting through this stuff to figure it out, or is this done as an automated process as well?
That's, I would say, human intelligence part of it, the HI part of this process.
Right.
Yes, we use a lot of data. Some of it is our own, some of it we buy from other partners that been proven that the data is quality. Evaluation of quality, and even deciding what does quality mean, because quality can mean different things to different people. Data set that may be quality to me may not be quality to somebody else who has a very different strategy, different goals for their marketing campaign. So evaluation of that is key, because AI is nothing without data. As I said before, it's crap in, crap out. It always has and always will be. If you're building your model on top of a flawed data set, why would you expect an accurate result?
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you on that. And I imagine there's a whole set of projects and endeavors that have failed because of the quality of the data, and that's a costly business.
In our industry, it has, because everybody is, and it's been like this, I would say, for at least a decade, maybe a little bit more. Again, with the introduction of digital advertising, we've realized very quickly that we're collecting so much more information just by the fact that we're leveraging more technology. It takes so much more technology to build, deliver the ad into a digital environment, whether it's desktop, mobile, connected television versus sending and showing an ad on television, right? Regular, like a linear television. Being able to use that data in a very privacy compliant ways is something that we've evolved for a while now in marketing. And it's also a trial and error, because you may think this data set is great, but you don't know if it's going to work until you actually put it in market. And data, also just like AI, is not monolithic. It's not just one thing. It's not just data. There's different types. There's data that defines the type of person you want to go after. There's data that defines what kind of message will work best. There's data that defines which channel at which time of day in which geography will likely deliver best results. And in the end, you can pay for all that data, and you can just find just the right set of people, just the right geography, but you show them a crappy ad, and then all that data is wasted because nobody would have clicked on that ad or engaged with that ad, even if you had no data at all, and you just kind of, like I said, like a Super Bowl approach, spray and pray it. Like, it doesn't matter who sees it, just anybody who's in front of television.
Yeah, I imagine there's a whole market. We're talking about marketing, but there's a whole market of data, and there's these kind of tins and cans of different recipes of different types of data out there. I mean, is that how this data is sold? Is it kind of labeled with like an ingredients list on it, and this is the quality of it?
That's a great analogy. That's kind of exactly how that works. There's different data companies out there that build their businesses around aggregating just the right type of data for a particular marketing purpose. There's companies that become data companies that kind of shift their businesses or evolve their business. We've historically, credit card companies, they sit on so much data of what people buy. So when companies that become data companies come to us and say, we have a data set for you that we think is valuable. Our job is to basically evaluate, well, where's this data coming from? If a credit card company comes to me and says, like, we have data of every Band-Aid that was ever sold, that's pretty great.
Yes, Pongo. Yes,
right? And it costs a certain amount. But just to show you kind of the spectrum of what quality really means, because quality could mean different things to different people. A different company can come to me and say, like, we have data based on people who like Band-Aids. And the reason how we collected it is because we scraped the internet and we found a bunch of articles where people talk about Band-Aids, sorry. And we didn't charge you X for that. So the credit card data set may cost me, not real numbers, but let's say $10. And that other assumed data based on just scraping articles where people talk about how wonderful Band-Aids are may cost me $1. So I need to look at my overall investment. What is my goal for this campaign? And is it worth it paying $10 for something that's accurate when I can get the same results, paying cheaper for maybe less quality, quote unquote, data? But that becomes quality to me if it hits my goals.
Yes.
So there's not necessarily clear black and white differentiation. This is good, this is bad. It kind of it depends. And there's billions of dollars in data aggregation, specifically for marketing purposes, that is being spent every year. And it's our job to evaluate, and the ones that continuously work for us and hit our goals, those are the ones we tend to stick with. But it's also on us to keep evaluating and trying new things.
Yeah. And I guess the fact that the data works for you is also, you're a dimension in that working. You know, it's not just the data, it's how you use it, what you do with it. So yeah, I'm kind of glad I don't work in this space now, because it just seems like a minefield of just different options and different ways of doing stuff. I'm glad other people are in the marketing space like your kind self, you know, to do it for us.
I think for me, it's, you know, like I said, I grew up in it. So remember how I tried to compare people who grew up in something versus people who are learning it. And to me, because I grew up in it, it's natural. It's kind of, that's just what we do. Because this concept of using data for marketing been in my life, you know, a large chunk of my career.
Yes, fantastic. So coming back to your career and advice to other people that are on their career and maybe starting out in this space, particularly into the kind of marketing and digital space, what advice would you give them on their journey, maybe to kind of smoothen it down and make it more efficient?
That's a great question. And I feel like maybe it's a sign of times and my age and how long I've been doing this, because a lot of my friends who have children who graduated colleges, who are thinking about things, reaching out to me, hey, can you just give them some advice? And funny enough, I think my advice always comes down to not necessarily anything related to marketing, but it comes down to human nature. With automation, with introduction of technology to more tasks, to more processes that we have, I believe interhuman connections are so much more important and so much more valuable to make yourself stand out, to build those connections. We talked about, I think before the recording, about different types of management. And difficult management kind of being, and maybe being more of a easy to work with person. And I truly believe that when a lot of work that being automated and the work that is left will require that human interaction, building those interpersonal skills, whether they come natural to you or not, is going to be super important.
I 100% agree with you. And my yes and to that is that we seem to be living in a time where people seem to be unraveling those interpersonal skills with our kind of, I guess, the digital space that we're talking about.
It's a trick, because you're right. It's on one hand, yeah, we're locking ourselves into our devices and we spend more time on them than talking to other people. Of course, I don't remember the statistic right now from Scott Galloway. He was saying what percentage of people go out on the first date based on human interaction versus something that they connected online first before they met. It's kind of like, and how small the percentages of people actually meeting for real and then based on that meeting set up a date versus going on an app, finding a match and going that way. Just as an example of, like, we know, and it's reality, you can't fight it. You can't fight, I think, that trajectory, like that ship has sailed. But realizing that and kind of forcing yourself to unplug sometimes and go like, you know what, let's do meet in person. And I find myself doing, especially since COVID, it's so much easier. Like, let's just jump on Teams meeting. Let's just have a quick chat over Zoom versus let's go get a coffee. Let's go get a beer and catch up that way.
Yeah.
Because we got people, for just mentorship. The people who still matter to me the most in our industry, the people who I came up with when I was younger. So if that element of that bonding is gone or limited, I'm curious to see how that's going to play out as people grow in their careers.
100%, yeah. And we've kind of lived this kind of revolution as well. And I've got caught up in it myself, so, personal experience, having a 70-year-old coming on 18-year-old daughter as well, that is living this world, trying to inspire the younger generation to get that balance right. As you say, it's happened and it's happening. How do we navigate that in a good way? And that's really interesting how you get to know somebody. Is it through digital experience or digital exposure or actually meeting them? And that's something I'm going to take away actually and contemplate and chew on. So, Oleg, I'm going to offer you a wish now. I'm going to be the tech genie for a second. I'm going to offer a wish to you for your industry, for your leadership, for your people that you're working for. What would you wish for from the tech genie?
Wow. What I wish for is, I guess, the quicker learning curve for the business stakeholder side of what we do. It's kind of like top to bottom, yes. When the company's strategy is, hey, we need to lean into technology, we need to lean into data to make ourselves better. The vision is right. How do you deliver on that vision? How do you get a buy-in from a large organization on different people who are younger, who are like all in, yeah, let's do it, to people maybe who are more cautious, who are maybe later in their careers, kind of like, I just want to play this out. How do I educate them? And make this familiar and comfortable to them, and want them to accept it versus first being afraid of it. So if you can teach me how to cut that journey to a much shorter kind of path, I would love that.
Yeah, I'll work on that. I like that. Okay, I think that's a good one to go for. And actually, I'm going to take a step back. There was a question that I normally ask, being a book person myself. Are there any books that you'd like to recommend to our audience around your passion around what you do?
Wow. Again, like I said, I come from philosophy and psychology. Like that's what, like my favorite books is history because it repeats itself. And I would say the types of books that I think set my mind to the way I need to communicate with people, get the results. I would say Machiavelli's Prince, Sun Tzu's Art of War, and another one which is brilliant. Again, Abraham Lincoln is one of the greatest leaders of any generation. So there's a book, Team of Rivals, by Goodwin. Oh my God, now I'm missing her name. She's a brilliant historian. Doris Kearns Goodwin. That book about Lincoln, specifically around the team of people he built around himself that allowed him to win the war. Basically, everybody in his cabinet were people who ran against him. And when he won, he hired them as Secretary of State, Secretary of Finance, wow, Secretary of War. And to me, that's such a great example of leadership, because when you're comfortable and confident in yourself, you're not scared to bring in somebody else who may have skills that you don't. And that kind of brings us back, I think, to early question you asked me. Because I'm not a software developer by trade, how am I comfortable being the CTO of a company? I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. So hiring somebody with the right software development background to help me lead that part of organization is very natural to me.
What a beautiful full circle. So Oleg, as we come to the final full stop of our time together, what's your final key takeaway that you'd like to leave as a gift to our audience listening to this podcast?
Be curious and lean into technology. You can't escape it.
Beautiful. What a beautiful tech note to finish on. Thank you for your time, Oleg. It's been wonderful having you on CTO Confessions.
Thank you so much.